Hey, happy Sunday. This is PFG Live, the only podcast that says you do not have to put your tray table in the upright and locked position. Welcome aboard. We got the first weather report in here was actually from Carl Tauber in the People's Republic of Rhode Island, where he says it's 83 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny, hot, hazy, humid. Robin had a sushi roll. Evils is here reporting some kind of report that says he's alive. Josh is here reporting audio check in southern Manitoba, where the winds are 050 at 3 knots, temperature 16, dew point 16. Must be froggy there. DBX from White Plains reports winds are 170 at 4 knots, visibility 10 miles, broken at 2600, temperature 29, dew point 23, altimeter 29er. 80. Dale reports from Canada in the Edmonton of the Alberta, 16 degrees science and scattered showers. We could use the water here. Thomas Hardy says 23 degrees centigrade and a nice thunderstorm in Karlsruhe, Germany. Welcome aboard, Mr. Hardy. Let's see, who did we miss? Did we miss anybody? Arsted says 80 degrees Frankenstein and sprinkling in Peoria, Illinois. Thank you. Ted Hyde from Casa Frog Pro Resources in the Florida says it at KLEE says winds are 330 at 5 knots, visibility 10 miles and clear, temperature 34, dew point 24, altimeter 3014. Remarks hot. 3500 C at the torchy end too. Oh, you're torching things. That's lovely. Well, welcome, Ted. In the Discord, we have Josh, Dale, DBX, Evils, Robin, Quentin, Proteum. Welcome, Proteum. Aspen, Carl, Arsted, Thomas Hardy, Ted Hyde, and Orjan. I'm going to go with the soft J. Welcome aboard. Here in southern New Hampshire, it is really quite nice. Temperature 85, dew point 85 Fahrenheit, dew point 59%. That's not a dew point. That's a relative humidity of 59%, and a little moist, but otherwise pretty nice. Manchester's reporting visibility 10 miles, scattered at 4,200, broken at 20,000. Let's see what else. Temperature 31, dew point 18, altimeter 2973, and there are remarks. Welcome aboard, CJ Stevens from East Tennessee, who reports, hello everyone, 86 and humid. The humidity has gone up, but we really want some more rain, please. If one of you guys could send us some more rain, we would truly appreciate it. I have to say that the investment I made, I guess it was 2 years ago now. I think it was 2 years ago. We had an investment. We had a repair because the air conditioner, which is right here in my office, you guys know it as a mini split, was losing coolant, refrigerant they call it, and I think it went 3 seasons. We had to put refrigerant in it, and finally I gave up and I said to the guys, "Look," and these are good guys. I said, "We're going to do a new system." And they said, yeah, I think it was no, this is the Mitsubishi. It was a Fujitsu. The Fujitsu system was kind of crummy. We had a lot of complaints. We like Mitsubishi now. So we did, that's when we put the AC in the shop, which is right under me. So we put 2 heads, a little more money, totally worth it. So we've had the 90 plus degree days, kind of a lot this season. And working in the shop was quite nice. And I know that DBX did similar. He has a mini split in his shop, and yeah, it's totally worth it if you can get work done and not lose days because it's brutally hot. It's just an investment, isn't it? So what else is going on here? Oh, yeah. Ted says 2 minis in his shop. Absolutely worth it. Not cutting it today, though. Yeah, you didn't have it wasn't too terribly hot down there, was it? No, you said it was hot, 34 Celsius. Yeah, so let it rip. Turn it up to 11. I think it's what we need. Oh, that reminds me, I have to turn off my mist collector, which I'm going to do remotely. The grinder's running today, and I will give you, as soon as I turn off my mist collector, I'm going to give you the update on the shop. So we are using the Lutron system, and we have a little controller on it. And I could just go over to the coolant. Here it is, mist collector. And I could actually, I heard it turn off. You guys can't hear it because we have excellent filtering. So let me give you the PFG Stones report for this week.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Everything that is not a 6-inch PFG stone is out the door. So if you ordered PFG stones in other than 6 inches, and it's out the door. There's a whole batch of 6 inches waiting downstairs. That's going to get finished. I'm targeting Tuesday to get them into shipping. But if, in case you're waiting, that's where they are. End of the PFG report. Oh, Tucker's here. Welcome aboard, Tuck. I didn't see him sneak in. You know, he is Iron Man. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. What grinder coolant do you use? I will tell you. I use Qualichem 250 250C. I think it's called X250C by Qualichem, 3.5%. Love it. I use the same coolant everywhere else in the shop except at 7%. And I use only distilled water. Only distilled water. Tucker is here with a late report. He says 80 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy in the Buffalo, New York. He's going to miss the live, but we'll be listening afterwards. We're going to miss you, Tuck. I know you probably have your hands full with family and stuff, so go do that thing, and we'll record it for you. Promise. Is that grinder specific, or do you use it because it's what you have? So my coolant story is long and storied, and I won't. I'm not going to tell it to you. You're welcome. But I landed on Qualichem, and I really like Qualichem. Hashtag not sponsored. And because I was using Qualichem in the other machines, then I continued using Qualichem. So you can make the argument that it's a little bit of inertia, but it's working great. 3.5%. Wasn't some of that story in the lubricant episode? Our historian Evils correctly points out that you need to go back and listen to the lubricant episode. We'll get you a number on that, I'm sure. But yes, I talked about that. Dale says, you know, if you had a water tower full of snake oil, you wouldn't need distilled water. So Dale just put in a really neat RO system in his shop. And Dale runs, he has 74 machines running 27 hours a day, and he's the only guy there, and he does it all with magic. But he needed RO water because he just put in, most people would put in an EDM machine. Dale put in 3 EDM machines in addition to his sinker. So the bottom line is he needs a lot of RO, and he just put a cool system in. Too expensive for what I need, but I'm still running distilled water made with actual heat. Josh says coolant was a topic even further back, more than a year. It's in there, but I like those guys. I'll tell you which one I don't. Well, there it is. Evil says it was PFG.Live 2025, 11/17. So November of 25. November of 25. Does that make sense? November of 2024, 11/17. Okay, thanks. I'll tell you which coolant not to use, and I know we're not supposed to dwell on coolant here, but there was a coolant made by Hankstafers which was 3. Gosh, I can't remember. It's in the coolant. It'll be in the coolant episode. But basically, it was, green and based on corn oil, and it oxidized and left brown stuff everywhere. It was horrible, horrible. I think that's when I switched to the Qualichem, and it was terrific. Yeah, I got your dig, Evils. He was confused by the date format. I hope that answers your question, Jack. Let's see. So we had a good week. I had a call from my friend, or a message from my friend Adam Brunette, not the other Adam. This not the other Adam. We know 12 Adams. And he had a need for a gauge to set up his vertical machining center, in which he has a fourth axis. No, that's not true. A trunnion. That's the proper name is a trunnion. And he had this weird requirement. And it was a 5.315 inch gauge. And I said, sure, okay. I said, I could make you something real quick. And he said, oh, that would be great. Which started the ball rolling down the hill, leading to what we're going to talk about today. Jack says, yes, thank you. I recently bought a surface grinder and there isn't much content on YouTube. You seem knowledgeable, but you only do live streams. Wow. I'm feeling a little self-conscious now. So I do live streams for sure. And doing a long form YouTube video is a lot of work. And I have a list of them that I will be doing, and I have some that I've done in the past. Go check out the channel. Yeah, we'll try to talk about it some more. But there you go. And happy to answer your questions, by the way. This is the place to do it. So happy to answer that. Where are you located, Jack, by the way? I'm just curious. One of these days we're going to have our oh, you're in California. Okay. The only problem with the coolant is it contains chemicals known to cause cancer by the state of California. That's the only problem. But I'm sure you're aware of that. Yeah, Rob Renz. How do you spell that? Robrenz. Rob Renz, also known as Robin Renzetti, who is live here on the chat today. He says Rob Renz has some decent service grinder YouTube content. Yes, he does. Go subscribe. Do not ask questions. Just go subscribe to Rob Renz on YouTube. He is a wonderful teacher, and you will learn a lot. And he hangs around here for reasons we have no earthly understanding of. But here he is. I think he's just trying to make sure we don't screw up. And I appreciate that. So Adam pings me and he says, yeah, I'm doing this thing and I'm trying to get this thing set up, and I've got this Mitsubishi control, which is bizarre. I think we got Adam hooked up with Dale to understand some of the Mitsubishi stuff a little bit, and it was just, anyway, he says I could use this gauge. So I said, hey, I'll make you a quick gauge. I'll make you a quick gauge. So I head over to the stock rack and I find this piece of steel, which looks like this. And if you're listening on the audio podcast, it is a random piece of 1x1 steel. This one has a hole in it. And it is also painted black. It's really kind of, literally a piece out of the junk pile. And I said, that'll do it. And I proceeded to make Adam a gauge. His requirement was 5.315. And I said, I will nail that, Adam. And of course, I'm talking to people and I got my hands full on the grinder and I'm doing all this stuff. And I absolutely nailed 5.314 inches. So I want to talk a little bit about about doing stuff like that, getting it right, getting it wrong. But it caused me to lose some sleep, which was good because I thought about what went wrong. It's like not the first rodeo. Evil says, I hope you at least got it exactly wrong. I'd love to tell you that I had 314 in my head, but no, it was not exactly wrong. It was just wrong. But I think I figured out why I got it wrong. And that's going to end with a question, not a statement. I have something I need to learn, and I'm hoping to be educated by somebody as a result of it. So, yeah. So, what do you do when you pick up? You're going to make a gauge. Now, in this case, it's a length gauge, right? It's super simple. It's just going to be a bar of something with two faces that are a certain distance apart. If this sounds a lot like a gauge block to you, you're not wrong. But we didn't need gauge block, 5/10 millionths accuracy, but we needed some accuracy. So where do we go with our pieces of steel was the first stop. Where does every gauge block start? According to Ox Tools, every gauge block starts on the saw. So we head over to the saw and we lop off a chunk of steel. And I reasoned, and my strategy was, the first thing I'm going to do is just get the sides done. What does done mean? They didn't have to be perfectly square. They didn't have to be any particular dimension, but we want to make them nice. So the first stop after lopping it off on the saw, of course, is heading over to the Labzetti plate. And if that sounds familiar, Robin Renzetti calls it the magic sanding plate, and we honor him by calling it the Labzetti plate. And giving one of the sides a bunch of hits until we find a side that is going to be stable on the grinder chuck. And that means it's got good contact, it's got multiple contacts, and it is going to sit on the chuck stably. Now, when we turn on the magnet, what will happen is it's going to sit down on those points that we just essentially polished up on the Labzetti plate, and it'll have some points where it's not sitting, in between those shiny spots. We don't care. We just want it stable. So step one is pick a side on, and put it down and grind it. And that's what we did. If I recall correctly, it took 7 thousandths or something to clean up. So, and we're running this does not matter, but we're running the 5SG wheel, 46H, I think. And we go ahead and we clean up. Oh, by the way, Jack reports he's watched all of your videos, Robin. So keep it up, Jack. You're doing great. Carl says, did you stone it first? No, stones come later. I will explain. Now, the chuck gets stoned. The chuck always gets stoned. But no, if I just hit something on the Labzetti plate and I'm trying to get to a first surface, the stones do not come out. We're not ready for them yet. So it goes down on the chuck and we clean it up 7 thousandths or so, and it looks very pretty. I mean, very nice. And you can see in the thumbnail here, it came out just lovely. Then I flipped it over. So now what do you have? Let's think this through. You just did this grind on a surface, and is it, this is a delicate word, is it flat? So the answer is, our chuck is flat. We ground it flat. We evaluated it. We put the steel on the chuck, and it is stable, so it's not going to move around. Let's just assume that there's no stresses in the part that are going to come out when we grind it. That's a good question, but it's a non-hardening steel. So yes, you have a reasonably flat surface. You can then check that if you cared, but we feel in the deepest heart, deepest of corners of our heart, that this thing is flat. So now we take it off, clean the chuck, flip it over, and we do it again. What do we have now? Theoretically, we have two flat parallel surfaces. Okay? And we're going to get back to some details of that. I went really fast past the, oh, you flip it over. Well, there's a couple of details there that we're going to get back to. So now you have two flat surfaces. What do you do for the other two? Now, the other two surfaces are not, they're ugly. If it mattered that it was perpendicular or some critical angle, we would have more work to do. But we don't care because this is not what's important. So we could just repeat the process we did before and end up with two more flat parallel surfaces. In cross-section, what do we have now? Anybody? If we take our long block and we slice it and we look this way, what do we have? Hey, Wes is here. Art that makes art says he's late. 78 degrees in Idaho and 100% chance of lasers. Pew! Where's our laser shark? Our laser shark is somewhere up on our sticker board. There it is. Good. Evils gets the correct answer. We have a parallelogram. Okay. We have a pair of parallel and flat surfaces and a pair of parallel and flat surfaces, but we didn't do anything to make sure that they were 90 degrees angles. Do we care? We don't care. That's fine. And then, of course, because we're picky, we can go ahead and put we could chamfer the edges. So I grabbed a couple of these V blocks that I had kicking around. No, I did not make those V blocks. They're aluminum with steel inserts, and then the V ground into them. And they work great, and it's just a chamfer. So chamfer, 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 4 chamfers, and now we have a length of steel that looks very pretty, and the ends are what we care about. Now we have to start getting a little more careful. And let's talk about what you do have. Because you have a parallelogram, you know you can't depend on any of those right angles. Fine. We need to stand the block up vertically to go grind the top surface. Do we care if the angle of that top surface with respect to the walls is exactly 90 degrees? No, we really don't. Because what we're going to care about is that the two faces of this long gauge are parallel to each other. And if there's a little bit of a lean, we don't really care. Hey, WR Rocket just showed up with a late check-in. Papa Alpha Delta Quebec, which is Kodiak. Is that on Kodiak Island? Winds are 100 at 4 knots. Visibility 10 miles. Clear. Temperature 13. Dew point 12. Wow. Altimeter 3014. And the remarks are nothing special. So welcome aboard, sir. So Evil says that's called a parallelepiped head. Wow. Well, it's in the chat. Usually pronounced. Okay, good. Information in the chat. So let's take a grinding vise and lay it down on its side, okay, on the grinding table. Now, if you have a good grinding vise, let's define good in a second, and you've checked it and you lay it down, then you probably know that everything's at 90 degrees to each other and everything is good. So what do you do? All we're looking for is a flat surface that is approximately perpendicular to the major line through this long gauge. So we can just jam it into the vise and tighten the vise, right? And call it done. And the truth is, you could get away with that for the first one. But let's think this one through. And this is where 1, 2, 3 comes from. When we grab something or we go to locate something, the rule is 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 points define a plane. So first thing we do is with the 3 is we find a plane. Well, the side that we ground is a nice plane, and we could put that up against the face of the vise, and now they're going to share a plane. Great. Now we need number 2. We need a line. So this thing is now able to rock on that plane. So what if we put a pin in the vise vertically and push the block up against the pin? Well, the pin now forms a line contact, which is the same as 2 points. It has 2 points of contact to define the line that's going through it. That's great. And now we're going to tighten our vise, but we only want 1 point, because if we add more than 1 point, we over constrain it. So there's a lot of ways to do this. One way to do it is to put a piece of plastic in there, put a piece of rubber in there, because all we want is force. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is we're going to put a ball in there. Now, that's not uncommon to see somebody use a ball to be the 1 point. The problem is that you will now get a Brinell mark. In other words, let's talk about that for a second. If I take a perfect surface, if I take a perfect surface and I put a ball on it and I put a little force down on the ball, what is the pressure between the hardened ball and this plate in pounds per square inch? Anybody? What's the pressure between the ball and the plate? Chris gets it correct. Chris O says lots. Correct. It is effectively, theoretically, infinite. So when you push down on the ball, the first thing that's going to happen is the plate's going to start deforming, okay, until the plate makes more contact with the ball. Yes. Robin says a Hertzian contact calculation. So as we push down on the ball, it's going to deform. The area over which the ball is touching the plate now increases until there's some equilibrium. And this is going to happen if you take a 1-inch steel ball and put it on that plate. You don't have to push on the ball. The weight of the ball is going to cause this to happen. Now, if you do push on the ball, you're going to potentially exceed the yield of the material that the plate's made out of, and you're going to leave a dent, and it is not difficult to do. I did it once, and I was being an idiot, and I didn't like it. And I won't tell you about that project because I'm still embarrassed by it. So there are ways around that. If you're working with something where you need the pressure, but you don't want to put a dent in it, there's mechanisms. You could use a flattened ball where you put the flat to the work and the ball to the vise, and you take what you get on the vise, or maybe the vise is hard enough, or you take a really cool trick is to use a spherical bearing, which are off the shelf McMaster car parts, and just stuff it in there, and the bearing will have some play, so it'll make do. So whatever method you use, Dale says that's what a piece of aluminum is for. Right. So Dale puts a piece of aluminum in there. The aluminum will deform and allow for a single force vector, a single point. That's another great way to do it. I actually keep aluminum welding rod around for that very purpose. Yeah. Robin says hardened, and this is a very good warning, hardened jaws still Brunel, meaning make a dent with high forces. Yeah, so you have to think this one through. So in this case, we're going to take a piece of, let's say, aluminum and stuff it in front of the movable jaw, and now tighten our vise, and now we have our gauge sitting up in the air, ready to grind on the top. We use the principle of 1, 2, 3. Okay? 3 points define a plane. That's going to be our fixed jaw. 2 points define a line. That's going to be a pin underneath the part inside the vise going to the vise floor. And then 1 is the single point or the single force vector, which we're going to make happen by putting something squishy like a piece of aluminum or a piece of welding rod in front of the movable jaw. Now, a lot of my everyday vices, I think even the Hermann Schmidts have a V-groove or 2 V-grooves at 90 degrees to each other in the movable jaw. It's the perfect place for a fat piece of aluminum welding rod. Okay? And then we tighten it up and we're good to go. So we go ahead and we grind it. Grind, and we get a beautiful surface. I think I have a picture of that. Let me see if I can find it. Of the parts sitting upright in the jaw. And yeah, here it is. Okay. So here's a picture of exactly what we just talked about. And once this part is sitting up in the jaw, you're now ready to take the next step. And here's where I screwed up. So if you take this block and just rotate it, in other words, you're going to lift it, loosen your vise, lift it off that fixed jaw as shown in the picture there, and just rotate it, and then the other jaw is pointing up, you're good, right? Well, let's just assume you did that, okay? And let's further assume that you're not going to get too worried about the length right now. So you go grind. If there was an error in your setup, like for example, let's say your fixed jaw is not perfectly perpendicular to the chuck, and it's actually leaning over, and you took that block and you just rotated it and put it back in and ground, you may end up with a parallelogram on the 2 faces you care about because of that slight error. So let's think that one through. Here's a 1, 2, 3 block. We're going to put this in the vise. Here's the vise jaw, and we're going to grind the top. But unbeknownst to us, the grinder head is sagging, so we end up grinding. Let's say the grinder head is coming from this way, all right? That's the Z-axis. We're going to grind this guy like that. There's going to be an angle on it, and if we just rotate this block and do it again, we end up with another parallelogram. Okay? Not the way we want it. We have a wedge here and a wedge here. However, if we took that block and instead of just rotating it on that flat surface, if we flipped it end for end, the side that was errantly ground too small will now be the side that is opposite the side that isn't errantly ground too small. So we cancel out the errors. Does it matter? I don't know. But if you have an opportunity to cancel out that error, that's how you do it. So if you think about introducing errors, you say, well, what if there's an error in the Z-axis of my grinder, so the head sags? Take care, Jack. It changes how you're thinking about flipping your part. So that's the first message. The other thing is, if you just did the 1, 2, 3 trick, right? And you did your first surface. Now, when you go to do your second surface, what do? It's not the same as what you did before. So you're going to flip the block, okay, to the opposite parallel surface, because you're smart and you're saying, I'm going to get rid of that parallelogram. So that's 3. But where does 2 go now? Where does your line contact go? Does it go to the same place? I would offer that it doesn't go to the same place. That line contact wants to be on the bottom now, because now you're starting to look for parallelism with the chuck. So you could slip a pin at the bottom, and now you have your your line contact on the chuck. And now you could tighten your jaw using the same trick as before, and you've achieved 1, 2, 3, except now you're getting parallelism with the chuck. Another way of saying that is the opposite jaw. The opposite face of your gauge. So I think I screwed up doing that, and I lost control of parallelism when I did this gauge. Now, I know what you're saying. It's like, come on, how bad could it have been? It was enough handful of tenths that it really bothered me. So the lesson there is that the strategy you used to do the first face of this gauge is not the same strategy that you used to do the second face of this gauge. The next thing so during this process, I was talking to some folks, which was probably my principal mistake. I wasn't focusing. And Evils asked me something. He says, well, why don't you, I don't know if he said, why don't you, but he said, well, what about side grinding or side wheeling the 2 faces? And I said, no, I'm not going to do any side wheeling. We don't need to do that here. And I try to avoid side wheeling if I can. But there was a seed of a good idea there, and I want to talk about it. WR Rocket says, the most common source of work holding errors is after tightening everything down, people forget to slap it a few times and say, that ain't going anywhere. Yes, I did forget to do that, and I am guilty as the next guy. Yeah, Evils says, hole up in no way intended my comment to be misconstrued as a good idea. Correct. But I thought about it, and it might have been a good idea. And here's what I mean. Let's say we did side wheel the ends. And again, I'm not a big fan. And it depends on what kind of thing you're making. Okay. So we lay the thing in the Z-axis. By the way, the Z-axis is from your nose to the machine. Okay, that's the Z-axis on a grinder. You lay it in the Z-axis, and then you side wheel one face, and then you lift the wheel. You come all the way over, and you side wheel the other face. You're going to get good parallelism. That's actually not a bad idea. Okay, if you think about where the errors are, that's a pretty good way to get good parallelism between the 2 faces. However, you're limited. You're limited by your travel minus your wheel width. So if you have a short gauge, that might work. If you have a kind of longish gauge, and in fact, at the 5-inch level with a 3/4 inch wheel, I actually could have pulled that off, but we were at the limit of where we could have done that. So that's another approach. Here's the other place I screwed up, and I seek ideas. And that is, if you're going to hit a dimension, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You could measure while the work is in the grinder, is being held ready for grinding. Or you could remove the work and measure it and then return it to the grinder. So I was measuring with, I had a couple of things. One was a micrometer you know, 5 to 6 inch micrometer. Another one was a Mitutoyo calipers. No, the calipers did not have better than half. I can't remember if it's half a thousandth of resolution, I think. So it wasn't great. It should have been better, but I didn't want to remove the work because it was going to take time. That was sort of a mistake. And if I removed the work, made a careful measurement, returned the work, and then used a very careful touch off, and then dialed in the additional amount, that probably would have been better. I think I trusted the measurements while on the machine, and the spoiler is that when I finished this whole process and I went to the granite surface plate and compared it to a gauge block stack, that's when I discovered I was under, and I was bummed. Okay, so you could go through this cycle of removing it. Now, on a grinder, when you remove something from the work holding and you go back to put it in, you have to clean. Okay, you have to clean things because of precision. So it's a slow loop. Another way to do it is to think about the work holding so that you can get to the part and make a measurement at higher resolution and accuracy than I did. So, for example, I could have lifted my vise up on transfer blocks, of course, made sure my transfer blocks were not going to introduce errors, and had more room to march in and get to both faces of that block with a higher precision micrometer. And that would have been not a bad idea. I could have had the gauge block stack ready to, and did a comparison measurement, you know, go over to the gauge block stack, take a measurement, go over to the work, take a measurement. But the way I did it, I didn't have room to get a proper micrometer in there. So I'm looking for other, you know, other ideas for doing this. Yeah, of course I want. Do you want to come in on audio, Robin? Just say the word. Okay, just jump. I'll bring you in. So this is me asking Robin a question. Robin, you should be on the air. Unless I screwed up.
I think I'm here.
I think you're here too.
Okay.
Yeah, so how would you approach this? I'll put your video on too. How would you approach this?
My typical approach on this would be to square up the block like you talked about, just the surfaces that don't count, and then use one of my favorite grinding tools, which is a very high precision, hardened magnetic V block, where the base of it has been lapped, so when it's sticking up vertically, it's extremely square. Because when you're talking about the vise gripping, just like in a V block, when you do V block work, having a single point contact on a V block with the normal clamp is already bending the work. It's arching the work in the V block. And anybody who's ever used one of the V block punch grinder gizmos knows that your placement of that screw axially in the actual contact patch of the V block has a huge influence on which way it's leaning. But and the other thing with that is you always want to use a thick block under the clamp screw, so that it's distributing the loads overall, so you're not actually arching the piece within the V block itself. So the same things apply to gripping the part in the vise as you were describing and using a point contact. So let's say your grinder is super accurate and everything works fine, but you would take it out and say, wow, in this one direction I've got it's not parallel and it should be. Well, that can be because that single point contact is literally bending the part in an arch in that contact. So a full width, whatever the contact patch is on one side, you want the same length on the other, and a piece of 3/32 welding wire, aluminum, is excellent. Smash it once, way harder than you would normally clamp to get the deformation relatively even, and then back off and tighten it the amount you want. So that's just a side shoot there. So I would grind the one end uh, perpendicular to the spaces you're sitting on the block. Then I would flip the block over. Obviously, we're talking about stoning everything here. I would sit directly on the chuck surface, but I would mount a whatever I need, 246, 123, whatever I need to get a support tab all the way up at the top of the block so that the grinding tractive forces that want to tip the part over are being supported directly at the top. Otherwise, you're asking for a horrific crash on the aspect ratio of the part you had there, which most people would know. Then my other favorite tool is a 50 millionths resolution Mitutoyo digital gauge that I've made a depth mic foot for. And I've made myself a set of extension rods so I can go any length that I want. Then that 3 or whatever, the 5.315, I'd set that up in a gauge block stack, zero the digital gauge on that, and then you grind the top and just come down with that, measure right down to the chuck from the top of the part, and you've eliminated all the carrying on with things there. If it's real accurate, then I would have one ceramic block used for when you want to put a gauge block stack on the grinder, but you don't necessarily want to buy a whole stack of ceramic blocks. Put the grind, take your grind, put the ceramic block stack, the block with the ceramic block on the chuck. After you've stoned the chuck, while the part's still on there, put that on. Then put whatever resolution indicator you need on the grinder, and you traverse from the gauge block stack right to the part. You're eliminating all the carrying on, and you can get really, really accurate stuff that way. But in that flip, like you said, with the whether or not your grinder is, in theory, it should be grinding parallel. If you ground your chuck and that's that surface, if everything's good, you really shouldn't have to worry about this. But if you're trying to negate that effect, you would want to rotate the part, in your flipping it over towards you this way, where it would stay parallel with that whatever that grinding action was. That would be important to flip that direction when you do that.
Yep.
That would be my approach to doing that.
So I thought about this when I couldn't sleep last night. So just to reiterate, you would take the first face that you ground and put that hard on the chuck, and then you would just put a safety, what do we call that? A block. You would block it in without influencing the part, and then
let me jump in there 1 second there, because you have to be real careful with that.
yeah,
Because we did say that we didn't really care about the perpendicularity of the part.
right.
You can't just take a, let's say the part was the part you had, so a 246 block.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that 4 inches of engagement would be enough to be happy. The only problem is
Right.
that we just got done saying that it's not necessarily perpendicular. So if you put the part on there and against the 246 block, and the part is leaning to the right,
You didn't
it has
support it.
room to clatter.
Right.
Yeah, it's not supported. And then if you're checking that, you can another safe way to do it without influencing it is to put the 246 block down, not completely tight up against the block. Then take a smaller piece of stock, push it over, and super glue it in place so that you're just touching the part without influencing it.
So you almost like a little super glue flag at the top.
Yep.
Or a better word for that would be a contact pad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to slide things on the chuck if the part's already on. You can't slide the block, and then you either trying to slide them together when you're holding two of them. This way eliminates that, and being able to put just gentle pressure on while the glue's curing and zero that out.
So I also like the idea of ceramic blocks for not being influenced by the magnetics, and you can put it in, take a measurement, take it out, and go.
You only need one. You can just buy one random ceramic block, 100 thousandths, whatever, just enough that, matter of fact, 100 thousandths would be good because you would actually get some pull of the lines of flux coming up through the ceramic into the blocks. So it would actually have a little force holding it down, but not so much that it would be stuck to the chuck. Measurement, you just use your steel blocks, but put that one on as part of your stack.
Brilliant. Well, I never owned ceramic blocks before, but that looks like that's going to change. Yeah, a couple of ceramic blocks would be a good thing to put into the inventory. Cool. I like it. Thank you. And just to wrap up the story while you're here, the original intent was I was going to leave a couple of tenths and then lap it in. But that was going to be wretched overkill, and that was completely obviated by going, flying past the requirement, and then it didn't matter anymore. So,
Well, I can mention relative to side wheeling.
yeah,
Side wheeling in concept is good, but side wheeling is extremely tricky in the sense that it is a super bad conformity ratio grind situation. You have a 100% line contact even when you relieve the wheel, so that it's only cutting on the narrow edge.
right.
It's high contact. The wheels flex.
Rings like a
And
bell.
you can have, yeah. Side grinding is very tricky. Where I know this very well is in grinding the spindles. When you go to grind the face of a spindle running on its own bearings, you have to make sure that wheel is super free cutting, because if not, it will follow whatever that original shape is. Now I'm talking about when you're trying to get sub tenth, when you're worried
Yeah.
about whether it's 20 millionths or 10 millionths facial runout. That is extremely important. And another mistake that people make side grinding, especially in rotary work, is when you have a system like that where the grinding wheel sprung. The grinding wheel is not infinitely rigid. It can conform and flex while it's grinding. And so when you come up and you grind and you let it spark out, but it could take forever to spark out unless you got a really free cutting wheel. And then most people leap off the wheel. Well, if you have just literally come up, grind, and then boom, off. Well, if you have a 5 millionths, 1 millionth indicator, you can see where you jumped off. You can clunk, clunk, clunk. So it's very important to, just as slowly as you came in and hit that face, to extremely slowly get rid of the backlash in the system and climb off of there very, very slowly. And if you have variable speed, turn your part speed way up so that whatever does happen is distributed over a very fast moving part getting off of there. And that helps you get a good face grind. So people that have ground cylinder squares, just because you ground it between centers and face ground it, unless you are aware of all these little nuances, there's no guarantee that face is actually perpendicular to the axis.
Is what you're trying to say that everything is rubber?
Yeah.
Okay.
And every minute detail of your mental FEA is important when you're trying to hit those things.
Yeah. Cool. Robin, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Robin, thank you very much. See, this is what the crew does. We help each other out. So I thought it was a great opportunity to learn from screwing up. And all my screw ups should be measured in tenths. That's my goal from now on, as opposed to, yards, which could happen. So another thing that came up this week, and Robin brought up stone, you're cleaning, you're stoning, you're constantly cleaning and stoning on the grinder. Somebody said, this actually has happened to me twice so far. And that somebody says, yeah, I marked this stone as my conditioning stone and this stone as my working stone. So I always use this stone and I condition it on the other stone, right? So whenever you have a I don't have any PFG stones up here. I know it's kind of weird. Whenever you have your stones, you have them in pairs, and somebody came up with this idea of, I'm going to mark this one as my conditioning stone, and I'm going to mark this one. Don't do that. And I know that I've updated the information page on the PFG stones specifically to say, no, you should randomize which stone you're applying to the work and which stone you're using as your conditioning stone. You should randomize that. Yeah, Robin's agreeing. You should flip the stones over so that you don't always grab the north side with your right hand. You flip it over, grab the south side. So this randomization of how you use the stones randomizes the wear. And this is our topic of on average, everything is average. You need to spread the wear out evenly. Evil says the rain I ordered is there. When you're done with it, Evils, can you just email it to me? Thanks, I appreciate that. So, one of the things, especially in doing flat things, right? We try to average out the wear, and that averages out everything. If on your surface grinder, right, you clean your chuck, you stone your chuck. If you can, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, move around the chuck as to where you're doing your work. Well, I did this one in the center. I'm going to do this one off to the right. I'm going to do this one off to the left. And that also spreads out the wear on the chuck. Another important averaging thing that I do all the time is I will go to the grinder. I will do a little project like this project we just did. And then, of course, when you clean up after or always before you do a setup, you're going to stone everything. Do not just stone the area you just used. Stone the entire chuck. So every time you pick up the stone to stone the chuck, stone the entire chuck. That's really important, again, because if you always stone one area, guess what's going to happen? You're going to dig a huge cavern that might be millionths of an inch, and you want to spread that wear out also. Now, I know stoning is a absurdly small amount of wear on a good surface, but you just want to spread everything out and change up how you do it. Somebody once asked me, what are your favorite stones? And I'm like, well, it depends what you're doing. But if you're just doing big tables, big chucks, it's the round ones. The round ones are my favorite because every time you pick them up, they're in a different orientation. And they don't, there's no right side, left side, north side, south side. Every time you pick them up, you're using them differently. And therefore, the wear patterns on the stone, they average out. So that's another example of averaging, averaging everything out. So does that mean that you can make very high precision surfaces without any, just by being averaging out your averaging? Not exactly, but you can get there. I mean, the Whitworth method is not inherently, I guess you can call it averaging, but the Whitworth method starts from nothing and gets you to flat. Evil says 3D print farms also try to randomize the placement of parts on the bed to level wear. Exactly correct. If you have a 3D printer and you print in the center all the time, take a look at your plate. Move it around if you can. It would be cool if a 3D printer, this would have to be in the printer itself, had a randomization function that says, oh, I could do this print, over here without changing any of the slicing, and it just moves it around. Are there any? Evil says, I think there's firmware that can do that. That would be really great. And if you don't want that to happen, you turn off the feature. But you are the firmware on your surface grinder, so average stuff out. because on average, everything's average. Earlier today, we were talking about the GPS system and how, in the old days, in the early days of civilian use of GPS, noise was being added to the system. It was called SA, selective availability. So if you wanted to find, what is my position, you would have to average over a very long time because of the added noise, and very long time. In other words, it wasn't tactically useful. That was the whole idea. And then later they turned off selective availability, and all of a sudden your instantaneous positioning dropped by a factor of at least 10 in terms of its error. So that was another example of, you can extract better information by averaging if you had a lot of time to spend on it. And we talked about that today. Carl says, when using magnetic work holding, does distortion due to magnetostriction have to be taken into account? So magnetostriction is literally a part shrinking as a result of an impinging magnetic field. Well, I can honestly say, Carl, I've never thought about it. I think you can introduce distortion with high magnetic fields certainly from bending, depending on the shape of the part. And it would not surprise me if magnetostriction came in some very high accuracy situations. I will say that on the grinder control, you could turn on the magnetic chuck, and then you can also set how much current you want flowing in the magnetic chuck. And you'll hear people say, oh, I'm just going to use that on residual. Okay, if you ever hear any grinder guys say, oh, I just used residual for that. So there, you could turn down the current a lot. For example, when I was doing, if I have a part that has a lot of surface area, I will intentionally use a very low amount of current on the magnetic chuck, and then I will give it a shove. I'll push it. I'll see, is that enough? If I have, my calibrated hand, if I could push that and it's not moving, then I have enough. Just the other day I did it. I said, I'm only going to put a little bit, and I gave it a shove, and I felt it move. I'm like, yeah, okay, it needs a little more, and I started using more. But if you put a big flat block, here's a 1, 2, 3 block. This guy's been ground a couple of times. In fact, the edges are really sharp. I'm hurting my fingers. If you put a big flat block down on the chuck, you don't need much. A couple of clicks on the current, and that's plenty. So one of the tricks that people will do, and I've done it, especially toward the end of a precision grind, is you'll literally turn off the current, not demagnetize the chuck, just turn it off, and the residual magnetism is plenty to hold the part down. And it's kind of the minimum amount of hold down that you can get, so you can play games with that. So it's one of those things you think about when you're setting up the work on the grinder, for sure. Yeah, cool. Anybody have any questions that we haven't covered? Because we're going to wrap it up. I could tell you that today I'm going to be in the shop grinding 6-inch stones, but otherwise it's starting to look pretty nice. I might sit outside and get some sunshine, and I encourage you to do the same thing if you have any. And I know you want rain. We want rain too, but as long as it's nice out and the sun is shining, we should get some vitamin D. Okay, seeing no questions popping in, and I appreciate you all. Have an awesome week, and hopefully we'll have more stories for you next week. We have a couple of things in the works. One of our favorite thread locking companies, I am in touch with them, and we're going to get an expert in here to help us learn something about those. That's happening. And some other stuff coming down the pipe. So just stay tuned. In the meantime, go to the shop. Think about your your mentally based FDM and not FDM. What am I saying? You know what I'm saying. Your simulations. FEA. So many TLAs. Think about your mental finite element analysis about how your part is squishing and where your magnetic field lines are going and where your forces are going. It doesn't end. So get flat, stay flat properly, and we'll see you guys next week.